The U.S. Department of Justice sues Apple.
Malicious code planted in xz-utils.
And we have a great KubeCon EU wrap-up for y'all.
He's Mike. I'm Steve. Welcome to Wired In.
Yes, Wired In, the show where we wrap up 10 articles, give you 10 quick breakdowns from the wildest news in the cloud-native world.
Yep, all as usual, all the articles are described below. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live. And worth addressing the obvious elephant in the room, if you've watched us previously, we have rebranded. We are no longer whatever it was we were before. All we remember now is that we are now Wired In. And we are, I don't know, family friendly and probably a little bit quicker to get things done.
Same crazy stuff, quicker wrap-ups, less rambling. So let's just get into it.
That article number 1. Kubernetes celebrates its 10th birthday, and it was actually pretty amazing. In this article, Jim Raposa provides an overview of KubeCon and the Cloud Native Con events. He hovers quite a bit on the fact that community is a strong focus in creating reliable and production level software. And he goes on a little bit, of course, as usual, everybody's rambling about AI and how it's going to affect us in the cloud native world. Talks a lot about platform engineering and new jobs in that space. I was there, and I tend to agree with him because maybe it was the beautiful weather that emerged in Paris for that week. 20 degrees and sunshine is not normal for Paris in this time of year. And it did seem like we'd gone back to a very friendly vibe. And I was pretty pleased with it because I was a little bit critical of the previous one in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm jealous I missed out. Hopefully I'll see everybody in Salt Lake City for KubeCon North America. But I heard good things. It was a pretty well-attended event. I think there was 12, 13, 14,000 people, which is more than the U.S. event had last year. So that's kind of shocking, especially coming out of Europe.
Yeah, I generally think the EU ones are better than America, but I might be biased. I just think all the American cloud native enthusiasts, they come over because it's in Paris or it's in Amsterdam or Barcelona instead of Chicago.
Yeah, no kidding.
Sorry,
All right, into the headliner, Department of Justice. The U.S. Department of Justice has sued Apple, or at least launched a lawsuit for anti-competitive behavior. Now, this really only applies to the U.S. market because iPhone and Apple dominates. I think it's like 65% of the phone sales are all in the U.S. And if you go to the next generation, it's at like 95%. All the Gen Zers are using iPhones. You're not cool unless you have one. So very interesting. They detail 5 major parts. One, an app has to be used through the App Store. So they take revenue there. There's the green bubble, blue bubble fiasco with Androids. There is the ability, like you can't create a single app that has multiple things. There's a lot of regulation and let's say infighting behind that to keep, let's say, an everything app from being created. So it's worth taking a look into it. I read it like a month ago. This has been out in the news for a little while, and it's pretty in depth. I was kind of shocked. I thought it was, just a headline, more political in nature. And then when you get into it, it's like there's some pretty good points that the DOJ makes to back up their case.
Awesome. Okay, we're going through this pretty fast. This is going to be shockingly quick for our viewers. All right, I love a good controversy. OpenTofu, yes, OpenTofu, denies HashiCorp's allegations of code theft. I can't imagine why this is taking place. And in this article, Mary Branscombe, she covers the dispute. What a surprise, between the OpenTofu project and HashiCorp. Allegations of code theft. HashiCorp, as we know, accused OpenTofu of copying the secure socket shell SSH of their Boundary software without attribution. And OpenTofu denies this thing. They developed their code in-house. There's a lot of detail in here talking about, and I think mostly we're talking about the fact that maybe if you don't like what the change, there's still a bit of, I guess we call it, I'll call it spiteful. It sounds a little spiteful. I mean, just to be opinionated about it. It's I mean, I only just read it, so did you check it out?
Yeah, I did. It's an interesting article. There's a little bit of hubbub in the Redis community for similar changes.
Oh, yeah?
I do think that, we'll talk about it in the next show. I do think that in the future, companies are going to have to adjust their open source expectations and really have a good path towards financial success over the long term, right? And I do think that when you have such a vibrant community, you built up this massive vibrant community around Terraform, and then all of a sudden you put it behind a different license, there tends to be some let's say controversy around that. And I think it's just going to continue. Obviously, OpenTofu and the CNCF want Terraform and HashiCorp to eventually come back to that open source license. How many steps they want to take to make sure that happens? Are they welcoming? Are they competitive? I don't know. I think we're going to see in the coming years.
Sounds like a solid hot take.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. All right, on to the next one. This is just a generic economy one. Cloud native platforms market to grow at a compound annualized growth rate of 25% through 2033. So that's in about 9 years. Anticipated growth from 4 billion to 37.25 billion. So pretty significant. A lot of that in the hybrid platforms market. So with increasingly like a lot of data centers and data regulation forcing companies to host things in certain regions. I think especially when you look at Microsoft growing out their amount of regions across the world, you're going to see this. And I think that hybrid platform sweet spot is going to be well utilized, especially with AI, especially with, we have to have data on-prem. We can only ship certain data to the cloud into these AI tools. There's going to be that hybrid sweet spot that customers are going to be looking for.
Awesome. Next up, let's bring it up here. Terraform module for certificate authority on AWS. Now, this probably sounds boring as whatever. This is a project created by Paul Schwarzenberger. He lives actually here in the UK, and he's an avid open source contributor and OWASP contributor when it comes down to AWS security specifically. And when he doesn't necessarily like something, he's not a guy to sit back and complain. He's someone who's going to do something about it. And what he's done is he's created this module for cert auth on AWS, serverless. You can find it at serverlessca.com. With the estimate of saving you, well, let's see what he says up here in tiny little print. Serverless certificate authority to be $50 a year, equivalent cost using AWS private CA around $10,000 per year.
Wow.
100% serverless, stored in FIPS 140-2 level 3 certified hardware, wide range of configuration options. If you want to save a ton of money on a CA, he's known for doing things in a very thorough and safe manner. I think it's absolutely worth checking this out. It just crossed my path, and I know Paul, and I trust what he does. So this sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's very in-depth. It literally walks you through step-by-step how to set it up and all the advantages of it. So it's very well done. And I love it when the website's set up like that too. I think they're using MK docs, so it's very easy for him to update and keep running. It's awesome. Very cool resource. All right, one thing we haven't gotten rid of. Yeah, we still have it. This is onto the crazy stuff, the last 5 articles that we want to discuss. The first one has to do with hacking, specifically a huge cybersecurity leak from the Chinese, I'd say, state-sponsored / private corporation, iSoon. That's ISOON. Somebody just uploaded a bunch of documents onto GitHub that was from the internal company, and it outlines basically the sort of targets that this company was targeting, and the certain, I guess, applications they were using to target them. So the targets include NATO, UK Foreign Office, some pretty big political powers that they were going after. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the dirty secrets aired out. Also, this has a lot to do with what we talked about at previous shows, where there are some state-sponsored, but I feel like there are some, like say, Western sympathetic people in different nations, and that also goes for Western nations. There are some other sympathies that change, and so it's going to become a interesting security landscape over the next little while. And it's going to tie in with some of our articles coming up next as well. Speaking of major data breaches and hacks.
Oh, gosh. Yep. Sisense data breach. The tech company Sisense suffered a major data breach, triggered an investigation by CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And it's never good when Sisense sends emails to everybody to say, please change your password. It's all very bad. It does get into, obviously, interspersed. I like when the articles are interspersed with how to protect your privacy and stay online. Do these things to toughen up your network against hackers. I like when the news agency is like, I bet you we could get people to click on these other links because this is all technically really bad. It was Krebs and Security cited multiple sources saying hackers accessed Sisense's GitLab code repository and which contained credentials for their Amazon S3 accounts. They weren't able to steal all the data, but they got enough of it. We don't know who's behind the attack.
That's always good news.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of, I mean, this just ties into the next article very well. Business Wire reports cybersecurity attacks are up 104% in 2023. Now, the attacks have been going up year over year, but I'm just kind of shocked. Like, you're doubling the amount of attacks. Is this because more and more people have access to the internet across the world? Is this just because of the sheer amount of money that's in it now, and there's more state-sponsored hacking that's in there? Is it because teenagers got bored over the last, couple of years during COVID, and they all got, crammed into that massive number? But I mean, if you're going to see, 100%, 150%, 200% every single year, that's a exponential curve kind of growth there, right? That's pretty significant.
Well, is it also that regulations have become so strict that and the definition of what is considered an attack attempt is it better reporting? That's what I wonder. That's got to contribute to some of it, but certainly not 104%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the sheer number of vulnerabilities that are going up year over year, it's because there's more cloud applications, there's more coders, there's more things that are getting shipped faster. So, and of course, the reporting is a lot stronger. So that probably has a lot to do with that number as well. All right, I think we have two more, right? Yeah. About
that, and then a bit of a chit chat at the end. Microsoft, I love the title of this. Microsoft is this is not a good article for Microsoft. Ground zero for foreign state-sponsored attackers. Executive says it's very difficult to defend against a top Microsoft executive for security said of state-sponsored attackers. And in this article, they're going through. I mean, hackers are targeting Microsoft in the United States. That's a light. Pardon me. Where's my description of this? Do you have it? There it is.
I was gonna say, I'm not hiding it from you. Did you get hacked?
Yeah, I know. I deleted my brain there for a second. Microsoft's security culture was inadequate and requires an overhaul, particularly in light of this is the quote I was trying to find, in light of their company's centrality of the technology ecosystem, the level of trust customers place in the company to protect their data and operations. Did you get through it, and did you go through this and find any tidbits? Because it's something we added very late.
Yeah, basically what they're saying is Microsoft's a global company, and so they have access to a lot of code. And with that, people have sympathies in different areas. And so it's very, very hard to, let's say, protect from within. You have to have multiple layers of security. You have to have zero trust in the corporation, in Microsoft. You have to be very vigilant of, allowing people to work remote and allowing people to walk out with specific secrets. And let's just say that this isn't an issue that is tied to Microsoft specifically. I think Microsoft is actually doing the right thing and admitting that this is an issue. Right? I think there are a lot of other private companies that have similar access issues around the world, and they're just not public about it, right? And
exactly.
Like into our next article, open source had its own issue, and this is the xz-utils hack that recently came out, and it was a backdoor basically from a widely used Linux utility that encrypts SSH connections, and it was basically a social engineering hack. There was an external, let's say, person or entity that had started contributing to this open source utility 2 years ago, I believe is when it started. Then over time became a contributor and maintainer, and then finally pushed some very well-coded backdoors into this utility. It made its way into some of the very first upstream Linux builds. but then was quickly found by, I'm not sure if the name is in the article, I'm blanking on it, but it was a professional at Microsoft who was just running performance tests and noticed all of a sudden some of the connections that were supposed to take, 0.05 milliseconds were taking a lot longer. And so when he looked into it, he found the bug. And I think this sort of just bleeds into the last thing, because Microsoft found this bug in the open source community. Microsoft also has a lot of resources finding their own stuff internally. It really just comes down to reporting mechanisms, right? Is a private company going to be reporting stuff like this? If somebody has, if you have 5 people working on a project, is that enough to raise red flags if something like this happens? It was pretty cool that as soon as it made its way into a public distro, that somebody running some small test was able to find and report this.
It was pretty hilarious, because I feel bad. I actually feel bad for the person who orchestrated this, because it took a year and a half to 2 years to get this in there. And some of the methods that injected the backdoor were done via covertly encrypted code being injected via test modules. So I actually added viable normal upgrades to this utility, and then via the tests went, okay, now I'm testing it, but is it testing it, or is it actually pushing new code into the software? It was like, there's a really elaborate, there was a really good diagram that was put onto LinkedIn that actually said, here's the actual step-by-step breakdown of it. And you're like, you look at it and you think, how is this not nation state? Like, why would one person put this into something so far upstream in the supply chain, knowing that you're going to enable goodness knows how many targets, and to have backdoor access to all of these? So this was absolutely a piece of brilliance, and huge credit to the random pedantic person at Microsoft. You said a lot longer. I heard it was like zero, like if it was 0.3 seconds, it took 0.5 seconds.
No, I didn't want to say 0.00. It was like a very small blip in terms of performance, but he found it.
We need these people, because that would not have been me.
Yeah, I guess my question is, if it wasn't him, would it have been somebody else a few days later? Because this was in some of the first builds that got shipped, right? And so you have all these open source builds, but you have these private companies that take it, wait a year, do all the tests, look for these specific issues that make its way into the upstream builds, and then they ship an enterprise version at the end, right? So that's, tinfoil hat on, it got found within a week of it getting shipped. I do think that somebody would have found it eventually. I don't think it would have made its way into the enterprise build. But after watching all the ambulance chasing articles come out about how so-and-so product could solve this and so-and-so product could solve this, like, at the end of the day, if somebody has access to that code and is able to ship it, it's gonna be extremely hard to know without it being a 0-day, right? If that happens at Microsoft or Google or any one of these big companies that are able to ship from within, there's not a lot you can do against somebody who maliciously waits out 2 years for like the right moment to attack. So
I think and this is going to be a learning experience. Not just for us. This is a learning experience for the would-be attackers as well, because they did spend a lot of time on it. But we need to be mindful of supply chain attacks like this, because the dependency on open source is massive. Everybody has it, regardless of whether you're open source or whether you're commercial. And if it's your direct dependency, or whether it's a transitive dependency, like xz-utils was in both cases, people were using it directly and indirectly. It was a great target, and this person bypassed the friendly test. How many maintainers are in xz-utils? Not that many. Sounds like they're ripe for help. I'm gonna do an excellent first contribution, which is what happened. And for them, that's almost all you need to do to be trusted. And there we go. And you just have to be clever after that and find a good way to conceal what you did, which they did until, the execution tests. The proof was in the pudding when it actually arrived. Was it going to be noticed? And it was. That's, in a way, a little bit of luck.
For sure.
All right. That is our 10 articles for our very first Wired In.
Yeah, 10 articles, 10 breakdowns. All the show notes are in the comments below. Make sure to follow the socials. You get a ping when we update things. We got a lot of new content coming your way, so stay tuned.
He's Mike. I'm Steve. Thanks for watching Wired In.